The adjustment brush is probably one of the most powerful tools that we'll have here inside of Camera Raw. So let's take a look at a few different ways that we can use it inside of this video here. All right, so you first find it up here in the toolbar. Just click on that little brush icon. Opens up a whole new panel over here on the right hand side. So it's not one of the panels that you'd normally see. It's a brand new panel once you click on the actual adjustment brush itself. At its core, I guess you can call it dodging and burning. It's so much more than that, and we're going to talk about some other ways that you can use it. But at its core, I think one of the things that I use it the most for is just some dodging and burning. It's basically a brush, all right? And if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you're going to see that you get brush size right down here. Size, feather, flow, density. So you get all these controls that control the aspects of your brush. Size and feather, really the only two you need to worry about. General size, how big do you want it? And then the feather is how soft an edge do you want around the edges of your brush. A low feather setting is a very hard edge brush, and a high feather setting is a very soft edge brush. And you can see those two circles that kind of shows you your feather, where the brush will feather between those two circles. All right, let's take a look at how we'd use this here. I'm going to come up, I'm going to click, you got minus and plus here. So I've got all these sliders. A little tip for you here. I don't have to zero them all out. If I've got all kinds of crazy settings, if I want to just go to exposure and I want it to go negative, I just hit the minus sign. Everything else zeroes out, and now I got negative exposure. So I'm going to hit my left bracket key, which is a shortcut for the size setting for your brush. And I'm actually going to go positive with my exposure. Let's do some dodging here. Let's make some parts of the photo brighter. Parts that we want to maybe draw people's attention to. Okay. Right around the trees. Maybe the rocks. Rocks right up here, maybe a little bit along the water right on the side here. Okay, so we've made these brighter. How much brighter? It looks 0.85, so almost the stop. But I'm not stuck with that. I can move the slider around after the fact, and I can change it. All right, now what happens if I want to start making some other parts of the photo darker? Well, I got to take exposure negative, but I can't do that or I'm going to darken everything. So what I would do is leave that where it is, come up here and click on New. It adds a new adjustment brush setting. I'm going to make my photo larger, or my brush larger, with the right bracket key. And let's take that to the negative side. And I'm just going to start painting on the photo. Okay. Now, that's probably too dark, so now I just kind of increase the exposure a little bit. But now I've gone in and I've made certain parts of the photo darker. So again, it's basically dodging and burning. That's pretty much it. If I want to see a preview, all I got to do is come up here and click on that little preview checkbox. That's before, that's after. Before, after. So maybe I'll make this a little bit darker. And so notice, and this is important, notice that there's two little pins on the image right now. Okay, these are your adjustment brush pins. The one with the circle inside is the one that is currently active. So if I make changes to it, that's what's going to be active. You can hover over, it shows you a little overlay of what you've painted on with this. So maybe I'll come over here and I'll click on the other pin, and maybe I'll come in here and I'll make it even a little bit brighter. Okay, so now those areas really stand out. Again, before, after. If you want to turn the pins off so you don't see them, but they're still there, you're just not going to see them, just click on Show Pins. Turns that little checkbox off, and now you can see your before and after. All right, so that's one example, basic example, just dodging and burning. Another thing that I use quite a bit, and this demonstrates a pretty powerful feature of the brush, is I'm going to take my exposure negative. All right, I'm going to go down to my brush settings. I'm going to get a really large brush. I'm going to paint negative exposure over the entire photo, okay, with a big brush. Then I'm going to come up at the top and I'm going to click on Erase. This puts the brush into erase mode, where again, I'm going to take a really large brush. Remember, it's in erase mode, so whatever I click on, it's going to erase the negative exposure setting from that portion of the photo. So I'll just kind of pop it right there. That might be too much. Make the brush a little bit smaller. And just kind of pop it right there. And what it does is it's kind of like a vignette. But you know the problem with a vignette, if I go to the vignetting panel, the effects panel, the problem with the vignette is that it encroaches in toward the center, right? Well, my subject is kind of over here, so it starts to encroach in on him and make him darker. So that's not really the effect that I'm looking for here. And that's why the adjustment brush works out really well for this, is that it lets me essentially just put a spotlight right on him. And you can see, take a look at the preview, before, after. So I'm able to darken everything else and just kind of put a spotlight. It almost is like a vignette, but it's a more controlled vignette because you're just doing it on a certain part of the photo. I use this one all the time. I mean, constantly. Come over here again. Let's take a different photo, landscape photo. Exposure is negative, big giant brush, paint negative exposure over the entire photo, right? Come up here, click erase, and then just click a couple times on whatever you want to stand out. Take a look at the before and after. That's before, that's after. See the difference here? So now that stands out more. So this is it's a setting that I use constantly on a lot of my photos because it is really handy to just draw attention to a certain part of your photo. All right, let's take a look at one last one here. So portraits. You can do some retouching using the adjustment brush, all right? It's not going to be high-end fashion retouching that's going to go on the cover of a magazine, but for most photographers, I think you can get some good, quick and dirty retouching done right here inside of Camera Raw. Okay, so let's zoom in on the photo here. Of course, as I always do, I zoom in on the absolute wrong place. So it's the girl looking up at nothing. Let's zoom in on her skin here. And just as an example, okay, and by the way, I've got a video at the end where I do a whole before and after, and I'll take this through a full retouch right here inside of Camera Raw. But just as an example of one of the things we can do, we can take our clarity and go negative with it. Remember, if we go positive, it gives you a kind of a gritty effect. Well, if you go negative with clarity, it gives you a softening effect. So I could take my brush, use the right bracket key, make it a little bit bigger, and I'll just start to paint on the skin here. Okay. Maybe increase it a little bit. But the idea here is that, remember, we know that clarity, when we take it to the right, gives you that almost kind of a gritty detail type of a look to it. When you take clarity to the left, it's kind of like the exact opposite. So it softens your photo, believe it or not. I'm going to turn on the preview here and you'll see it. That's before. That's after. Before, after. Here, let me pull it back just a little bit more. We'll kind of accentuate it a little bit here. Before, after. See how it kind of softens the skin a little bit? I haven't done anything else here but clarity, but it does give you kind of a skin softening effect to your brush, which is neat, and it works really well for portraits. So there's a ton of other things we can do. Again, go check out that before and after video toward the end of the lessons. I did one on landscapes, did another one on portraits, and I'll show you several things that you can do to retouch a portrait, but kind of just wanted to whet your appetite a little bit to show you some other uses for the adjustment brush that we might not normally think of. You know, once you get past the old dodging and burning and you start to dig down a little deeper, there's a lot of potential here.